Welcome to A Warm Embrace, where we believe in the transformative power of touching lives and embracing communities through the power of captivating stories. Sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in the warmth of the Warm Embrace podcast.
Hi, Guillermo. Good morning.
Hi, John. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How about you? How's the weather right now in Miami?
I'm doing well, thank you. The weather is actually quite cloudy today, so it's not it's cooler out considering that we're getting into the springtime, but it's cloudy, which is surprising because I actually thought it was going to be a sunny day. I don't know why, but you know what? It's nice out.
Today we will be talking about our resilience. I think it is one of our theme in your social media, right?
Yes, actually, it's this week's theme. So I'm actually intrigued in you asking about it. So thank you very much.
So I'll be asking a few questions, just like the past episodes. That I hope we can gain knowledge regarding resilience from you.
Great. I'll do my best to make you proud.
Okay. What does resilience mean to you personally, and how has it played a role in your life?
Resilience has always meant throughout my life the armor that we wear following the challenges that we overcome. It's just one of those things that's like I've always felt that we walk around with a certain shield, right? And that's as a result of any challenge that we've faced, and we've come out stronger as a result of it. And I think that the whole concept just feels that the more we face, the more we struggle, the more we grow. And that's really resilience in a nutshell. It's an ability to adapt. And it's also the idea to be able to really, really latch onto our inner strength, because we are stronger than we can ever imagine. The strength that we have within is one that we don't realize until we're actually faced with the need to use it. And so I believe that resilience grows from both that strength and that ability to adapt. It's when you find one door closed, you go find a window. And if that window is closed, you go knock on another door. And it's that ability to be able to get up and feel that you can fight another day. That's true resilience. That's the ability to say, you know what, I'm not going to give up. And it's the ability to tell any challenge, you don't own me, like the song says, you don't own me, but it also doesn't define us. Any shortfall that we've had, any struggle, any pitfall that we've fallen into hasn't been hasn't been something that has truly defined us. And the ability to truly get out of it and then come out stronger as a result and ready to face the next challenge that is inevitably around the corner. That's true resilience.
Thank you so much for that answer, Guillermo.
You're very welcome, brother.
Can you share a challenging experience you have faced and how you were able to bounce back from it? I think it's more personal right now.
Yes, that is. There's so many. I guess my first one that I want to go ahead and really experience was the fact that when I was applying to law schools, I applied late. It was a time that I was just, you know what, I figured that I was going to get into the different law schools that I wanted to get into, and I didn't really think that I needed to apply as early as my friends and colleagues. So I procrastinated. It's not one of my better traits. It's not one that I actually like to admit that I have, but you know what? I do procrastinate, or I did rather, more so than I do now. But the truth of the matter is that when I was applying to law school, I applied to certain law schools that I wanted to get in. And interestingly enough, I got waitlisted. And that was an eye-opening experience to me. And it was just one of these things that's like, how could I get waitlisted? I was under the impression that I was a sure acceptance. And then the moment that I got waitlisted, then I realized, okay, I have to go ahead and make different choices, because I'm not going to go ahead and I can either sit here and wait until a spot opens up, or I can actually do something about it. So of course, on the waitlist avenue, I started calling the schools and started seeing how I can move myself up, how I can move myself up. And at the same time, I started applying to different schools. I started submitting different applications. In so doing, different opportunities resulted. So, for example, I got scholarships in other schools that I hadn't previously considered. And in the end, the original schools, all those spots did open up. I actually ended up going with one of the schools that offered me a scholarship. And that was something that I felt was a blessing in disguise, but it resulted from, you know what, I experienced a setback, a temporary setback, and rather than let that define me, or rather than let that be the one all end all, I decided to do something about it. And that's one example. And I think that my professional life has also been one where I've had my struggles, I've had my falls, I've had my trip hazards that I've stumbled over, and I've come out stronger. So for example, going back to the story, I think just to give our audience and our followers an idea of my history, I've always wanted to be a judge. And that was something that was my dream from, I believe, 6 years old. It was one time that my older sister was watching TV, and it was the People's Court, and it was Judge Wapner. That's funny. I just dated myself. But for the people who don't know, that there was a show when I was younger, about 6 years old, and it had this older judge. And to me, I don't know what it was about him. He seemed like the epitome of wisdom. And more so, he seemed like the epitome of fairness. And at that young age, I said to myself, I want to be him. I have, to this day, I've asked myself this question as to what was it that really made me want to be like him. I remember my friends saying, I want to be an astronaut. I remember my friends saying, I want to be a race car driver. I remember my friends saying, I want to be a fireman, a policeman, and all these other seemingly exciting professions. But I was the one that said, I wanted to be a judge. And that was my lifelong dream. That was the dream that I wanted to go, that I proceeded my entire educational career on. I knew going into middle school that I wanted to be a lawyer, that I needed to be a lawyer in order to be a judge. And so I started taking electives that were geared toward that. When I got into high school, I started taking electives that were geared toward that. And then when I got into my university years, my undergraduate degrees, I made sure that I chose my majors that would look the best for a future law school application and a law school admission. So I knew what my next step was. Every step of the way, I knew it. And then I became a lawyer, and I was biding my time. I knew I needed to be, my professional track was one that I wanted to be an immigration lawyer first, because that was my family's background. And then I wanted to be an immigration judge. And then from an immigration judgeship, I wanted to parlay that into probably a federal appointment and go even higher. I was at a very young age, I even thought to myself that I wanted to be the youngest Supreme Chief Justice of the Federal Supreme Court. And that was the dream. But unfortunately, in my profession, I trusted somebody very close to my life, it was my sister, and I allowed her to use my law license here in Florida while I was in Kansas at the time. I had opened up a second immigration law office there, and I allowed her to do some real estate transactions under my license unwittingly, and thinking that she would not do something that would jeopardize me. And ultimately, it ended up jeopardizing me to the point that I eventually lost my law license. And that was something that was detrimental. By saying detrimental, it was truly life-crushing to me, because that was the identity, that was the person that I was, in my mind, destined to be. And it came to a point where I was even angry with God. And I asked him, how in the world can you allow somebody to dream and then let their dream slip away? And so that was really a big thing for me. And so that was my big fall. But with work, with an amazing support system, mainly my wife, my parents, they were there, and they let me grieve. They let me be angry. They let me ponder about my future. And it was just one of these things that eventually I started getting up. It took longer than I would have liked, to be perfectly honest. For a time, I felt like I was just walking on this earth as if dead on earth. But eventually it got to the point where I started exposed to different speakers. I started being exposed to different motivational parties, different mindsets. I started realizing that no, my life did not end at the age of 27. I mean, I was a young attorney. I was actually one of the youngest attorneys to be licensed in the state of Florida, and I can only surmise that I was probably one of the youngest attorneys to ever be disbarred from the state of Florida. And I think that was something that I felt I would never experience. And so from that, I was able to take my experience, and I was able to actually think back on when I was choosing my majors, when I was choosing my undergraduate majors. I did not necessarily only choose them, even though at the time I thought I was thinking of my majors for a law school admission. And my two undergraduate majors, because I got two bachelor's degrees, one was on international business and the other one was in economics. And so I started thinking back to the time that I was choosing those majors, and I thought about it. And I remembered one day that I thought, well, these are your fallbacks in case you ever need it. How interesting that I was placing an insurance policy on myself so early on, right? And so eventually I was able to use my business background, my business educational background, to go into an industry that was completely foreign to me. I am now in an industry that involves architecture, that involves engineering, that involves interior design, that involves construction management. I am in a building industry that I never thought I would be in because it's so foreign to me. Granted, my wife is a designer, an interior designer. That is her background. She has a master's in architecture, and that's her background. And I was always supportive of that endeavor of hers, but I never thought of myself as being in it. And with time and being able to actually get up and dust myself off and being able to go into and decide, you know what? I can either let this one fall define me, or I can actually get up and do better and become somebody even more. And that's really the whole concept of even more. And eventually I have now been able to assist in opening up a company, and I'm now launching a sister company that is involved in the architecture and engineering field, and also the real estate development field and the real estate investment field. And look at where I am now. And I sometimes think that if I had stayed in the path that I planned for myself or predetermined for myself at the age of 6, which is so interesting, I wouldn't be where I am now. I probably wouldn't be sitting here today having a conversation with you, John, and our many listeners, letting them know about the power of resilience, about the power of being able to fall. And no matter how long you stay down, the fact that you get up is the true example of strength. It's the true example of adaptability. It's the true example of resilience. Again, just to quote Nelson Mandela, don't judge me by my successes, judge me by how many times I fell and got right back. I know I didn't necessarily quote it exactly, but I really got the gist of it in terms of that quote. But to use Nelson Mandela as an example, think about what he was able to do for an entire nation and the example he was able to do for an entire world. And the example that he was able to give to an entire world, that he was in a jail cell for nearly 20 years or upwards of 20 years, and then come out to then become the president of South Africa. I mean, that is an amazing feat. In no way can I compare my experience to his, but I can go ahead and correlate it because I experienced my own downfall and I feel that I've gotten back up from it. And he had his. And that's the true power of resilience. That's the one example that I can give, or the two examples that I can give, because they truly mean what it is to be resilient. And so I hope I've given you some idea as to what resilience means to me.
God is quite generous, Guillermo, in your life, because He did not give you a very kind heart, but also a brilliant mind. I think you are one of the rare person I think that I knew.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And yes, I do give so much credit to God and our Creator, because at the end of the day, I can't do the things that I do without knowing that He's in my life, that there is this greater power overseeing this world. And so I appreciate it. I appreciate that. And of course, the thanks are can't go to me. They do go to the above.
How do you cultivate resilience in times of adversity and uncertainty?
You find a way. That's truly the answer. You always try to find a way. There is never one challenge, there is never one problem that there is no solution for. And that's something that I constantly try to remember. Even nowadays, even something recently, in our business, I sometimes feel that I have 3 doors closed and I have to go ahead and find 5 or 6 windows. I know it's a simple example, but the truth of the matter is it's never letting no be the final answer. It's not what can I do, or it's not how can I do it. It's how can I do it now, or what can I do now? Because that's the truth of the matter. It's what is it that we can go ahead and do now that can go ahead and get us up? How can I put this one leg in front of the other and walk in that direction? And there have been many a times where it's just like, okay, there's been so many doors closed. It's like, okay, that's the answer is no. And that's not necessarily the case. It's like, because have I tried the next 3 doors? Have I tried the next door? And sometimes when I look at that and I think about that, I have to go ahead and say there has to be an answer. There has to be an answer to this problem. And I remember that I heard a quote one time that it is, if you sit in the problem long enough, the answer will come. And that's true. If you actually sit in it and you actually observe it and you actually look at it from all the different angles and all the different avenues, the answer will come. It may not be the answer that you wanted, but the truth of the matter is that the answer will come. And so that's truly the mindset, the idea of resilience. It's like, what can I do? What is this one thing that I can do now? What's this one thing that I can do next? Where is this one door that I'm not seeing? Or where is this one window that I'm not seeing? Where is this one key that I'm not finding that I can go ahead and use to walk through this door? That I can go ahead and use to overcome this challenge, that I can use to overcome this struggle. And even in the smallest avenues, there is no problem for which there is no solution. And that's truly the notion of resilience and what the mindset that it requires.
I think you answered the next question, Guillermo. It's amazing. The next question is, what role do mindset and perspective play in building resilience?
As we know, John, mindset is really one of the most important things. And as I think I mentioned in one of my prior episodes, to this day, as I go do exercise every single morning, one of the first videos, I listen to a video, and it's an audio, but it's on YouTube that I listen to it, by Brian Bullock. And it's about the words, the power of words. And it always ends because the power of your words have the power to change your world. And it's true. There are just moments that it's like I wake up, and even though I make a conscious effort, I truly make a conscious effort that when I wake up to go do exercise, I try to take a few minutes to go ahead and just be thankful and be grateful. But sometimes your mind is racing. It's racing from the night before. It's racing from the day ahead, or about the day ahead. And I have to take a moment and I take a step back to be grateful. Even in the moments of gratitude, your mind is still somewhere else. And I still struggle with that. I'm still one of those people who I want to control my mind, and I want to go ahead and control that. But the truth of the matter is that sometimes our mind runs. Our mind is, it's interesting. There's this author called Michael Singer, also known as Mickey Singer. And he, in one of his books, he always says that, what would you do if your brain or if your mind was a physical person? With the amount of words that your mind produces, you would actually tell this person, I need to step away from you. Again, it's interesting, and I'm paraphrasing, but the truth of the matter is, you would actually tell this friend, you're talking way too much, or I need to take a break from you. But that's not something that we can go ahead and do with our own mind, right? But the truth of the matter is that we can. It's sometimes, and the way that I combat it is with gratitude. And the way I combat it is to be able, every single morning, I listen to this audio where I'm reminded that my words have the power to change my world. And so instead of thinking about the problems, I start trying to find solutions. And that's where that shift comes into play. It's that I start thinking of the positive. And again, it comes back to the whole, what we discussed in our prior episodes of what's the gift, what's the blessing, what's the lesson. And an additional question is, what's the solution? Because we have the power to be the solution. We have the power to find the solution. When we sit in the question long enough, the answer will come. Why? Because we are taking the time to find that answer. And again, that is an example of resilience.
Thank you so much for that, Guillermo.
You're welcome. Thank you.
With that, can you provide examples of individuals or communities who have demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of adversity?
Ooh, history is replete with examples of that, John. I mean, I touched upon Nelson Mandela, that he's a clear example of resilience. Think of Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, how many failed attempts did he do with the incandescent light bulb before creating the light bulb? There is a story that I actually recently read about Thomas Edison. It was if I'm not mistaken, I believe it was in 1918, where he had this huge lab that it was his pride and joy. And that's where a lot of his inventions were made. And he loved his lab. And of course, he had people that were working in the lab. And one night, the lab caught on fire. And he was actually quoted as saying to his kids, go get your mother, because this is the last time that she will see a fire like this. Can you imagine that mindset, that how optimistic this man was, to be able to say, to be able to see his pride and joy, that treasure trove of inventions that were in that lab, that were in that building, seeing them go up in flames, how anybody in their right mind, like even me, sometimes I think it's like, oh, if he had just packed up his bags and went to relax and lick his wounds, he would be completely understood. He would be completely justified. But to then just say, this is the last time she'll ever see this fire, he was already thinking of the solution. He was already thinking, this is not going to happen again. He was already thinking, what do I do next so that I can go ahead and push forward? That's a true example of resilience. Think of also the Polish people as a whole. They at one point disappeared off of maps.
I never know that.
Yeah, they did. The Polish people disappeared. The country of Poland disappeared off of a map. And then and later on, how long were they under communism? And it is said that they gathered together, and it was their faith. It was their faith, and it was their camaraderie. It was their faith in themselves. It was their faith in God that they overcame communism. That's resilience. I mean, there's so many examples, even to think of somebody even more recent. Think of J.K. Rowling, of the author of Harry Potter books. I mean, she was nearly destitute in terms of her life. Her books and her stories were rejected how many times? And she's now become a billionaire multiple times over. That's resilience. This is somebody who had this idea and held steadfast to it, that she's now become a major force, literary force, to the point where it's like there are even fan fictions or fan theories that the world, the mythical or the magical world of Harry Potter actually does exist, because her descriptions are so vivid that that many people think that the imagination can't even come up with that. Can you even imagine that, John, to think that somebody's imaginary world, somebody that was able to come up with these beautiful and amazing stories, people think that world has to be real because our imagination is incapable of reaching that depth. That's such a contradiction that is even that's so mind-boggling to me. But that is an example of resilience. That is something that is an example of being able to see somebody overcome so much. And now people the world over read and are in awe of what she was able to create.
It is part of my childhood also.
Yes, exactly. I didn't think about it. It's like it's amazing how many of us grew up with it, and to think that if she had just left that in her notebooks, or if she had just given up and said this is not something that is ever going to take off, we wouldn't have been gifted that beautiful world and that magic. And so those are just a few examples, but history is so replete with examples of resilience. And we see that every day, and we don't even have to go into these grand schemes of examples. We see resilience every day, and all we have to do is just observe. All we need to do is just look. We human beings are examples of resilience. Because at the end of the day, it goes back to the first question. It's like, what does resilience mean? It's the power. It's truly understanding our inner strength and our power to adapt. We are that. We are examples of resilience every single day. The fact that we get up and face another day is an example of resilience. And so we truly, as human beings, are resilient naturally. It's just a matter of being grateful for it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Especially here also in Asia, Guillermo.
Agreed.
There are person who doesn't have one leg but still doing the manual labor in a construction.
Of
So
course.
that's what you said a while ago, that human being is the example of resilience.
Exactly. Let me give you another example. There's this speaker called Nick Santanastaso. He was born with a condition that he has. He was born without legs, with one arm, and on that one arm he only has one finger, and on the other arm he had a smaller stub to the elbow. This man, I love hearing him speak. He's an incredible speaker because the power of motivation and the power of resilience that comes from this man is amazing. He became a bodybuilder. He's now a motivational speaker. He was a wrestler, to the point where at one point he even told his parents that he needed to amputate one of the parts of the shorter arm because it was so much pain. And the only reason that he'd be able to continue being a bodybuilder or do wrestling and continue with his mission, he actually amputated a part of his arm. That's resilience. It's like, think about those decisions. That's a true decision that somebody is willing to go ahead and make in order to further their mission. That's amazing. And just like how you gave that example of being able to see this person who has just one arm and she does manual labor, you see these examples that sometimes you're like, wow, your problems. And when I say I say it as a collective. It's like our problems seem so minute, so small in comparison, but they're big to us because we make them big. And that's truly the matter. And it's no matter how big or small we make our problems, the fact that we need to get up after that fall and do better and just face that world, that is how truly resilient we are. And that really is how special we as human beings are.
Well, thank you so much, Guillermo, for this episode. I learned a lot in this episode, and also
Thank
the
you.
example that you gave. It really resonates with me.
It resonates with all of us. It's
Hold on.
amazing. If we truly look for examples all around us, we see examples of resilience everywhere. We just need to be willing and open to go ahead and find them.
I think that concludes our episode for today. Guillermo, what is our takeaways in this episode?
The takeaways are truly a whole matter of we truly are stronger than we think we are. And the fact that that if we go ahead and tap into that inner strength, we can accomplish so much. And that truly is the example of what resilience is. We need to be adaptable. We need to know that we can go ahead and find a solution to anything. And all we need to do is look around us. Look around, go do a quick Google search of resilience and be able to see fierce examples of true resilience. And once you do that, you're going to be in awe of the amazing feats that our fellow human beings have been able to accomplish. And then once you do that, go out and walk and see the resilience that we see in our fellow neighbors. And then look at ourselves and look at how we have been able to overcome any struggle that we've had, because each and every single one of us has overcome something. It doesn't matter how small it is. or it doesn't matter how big it is, we have overcome something, and chances are we have overcome so many other things. And that truly is an example of how we as a human being, as human beings, or we as a human species are truly resilient. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate these questions. I appreciate you taking the time to really learn more about this week's episode's theme, because it truly is eye-opening. It truly gives us something to think about. It's something to chew on. And for all our followers, thank you so much for giving us the time, for giving me the time to be able to share this with you, to share my story with you, to share my insights with you. And if any of this resonates with you, please do us a favor and follow. We're available on all social media platforms. We're also available on YouTube. Social media platforms include Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and this podcast is going to be available on all major podcast platforms. And again, thank you so much, because I wouldn't be able to do what I do without having all of you. So from my heart to yours, a warm embrace.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your small gesture means the world to us and helps us continue creating more content like this. See you in the next video.